So, and it's good old Streamlabs. Okay. Apologies for that. It's because I had to switch software, and this software works. Of course, this software works slightly different from the software I was using before. Okay. So, as I was saying before, good morning from Japan, and a lot of people actually don't realize I live in Japan, and it's, I can say, it's a nice sunny morning. It was a stinky hot morning over here in southern Japan, and thanks to everyone for joining me for my August live stream, and thanks for my supporters, of which I can see a considerable number in the chat queue going down there. Let's have a look. Also, let me put the chat in there too. Press a magic button and we should have chat. No, it doesn't want to work. This is another problem with wearing software. I set it all up so I press buttons and it'll do everything, and now it doesn't want to. Let's see if we get chat coming up there. See if it will show on screen. To err is human. To really screw things up, you need a computer. No, chat doesn't want to show up. I'm very sad. Oh well, what can we do? So, anyway, OBS wouldn't stream this morning, and so I had to switch to Streamlabs, and it seems to be very, very unreliable. Oh no, we have chat appearing up. Increase my mic level, you reckon? If I turn it up too much, you'll start hearing the aircon blaring because the thing seems to explode. Okay, now I can't turn my mic up too much, it will start clipping. But anyway, thanks first to all my supporters who have made these videos possible. And you've heard this if you've watched a whole one of my reviews and watched to the end. And thanks for all of them for turning up this morning. Also, before I start, what people may not know is my father was a scientist, and he wrote a book for ordinary people. It's about biological sciences, but it's called Science, Myth or Magic, and it explains the scientific process. You can actually buy it in Kindle on Amazon. I persuaded it was published originally about 20 years ago, and I persuaded the publisher to Kindleize it, and they've Kindleized a couple of digitized a couple of the books in a format which you can read on Kindle, which is very good of them. And so it's available on Amazon. You can just look up Science, Myth or Magic, and you'll find it by S. Anthony Barnett. And what talks about how the scientific process works, because a lot of people think that science is just to say this is true and this is not true, and that's not how science works. Science works, as I've said before, through observation. You observe something and you try and make a hypothesis about why that what you've observed is so, and you test that hypothesis, and if you learn more from that, it's a learning process. It's not a declaration of truth. It's not a religion. And one of the problems these days is the news vastly oversimplifies science, and has forever because they appeal to people who do not have complex thinking, and you do miss out on those things. And when the this news talks about scientists this and scientists that, you'll notice that absolutely zero news outlets, well, big news outlets, link to actual scientific research. And because if you read for yourself, you'd find out that the scientists often say, we did this research, but there are all these cautions that things you should note about what was wrong with the research or incomplete, and that the results may not always be perfect. Something you see often. So, that looks pretty hot if you're in 40 degrees C and down in LA. So you've beaten me out here. It just gets really humid here. It sits in the mid 30s, which is like the kind of late 90s, and gets just very humid. So I've been exercising outdoors, and it's just like very, very humid, and that's, well, at least for breathing heavily, it's better for your lungs. Thank you very much, Luca, for your €5 donation too. And just saw the chat there. And apologies if I can't see the chat clearly because I'm watching this. I've got a screen over here so I can make sure I'm in center, more or less. And the chat's over here, so I haven't got it set up as neatly as I'd like before. So what I'd like to do first, I'll answer Luca's question, since they were very kind enough to send me a €5 donation my way. Thank you very much. So if you do want to, if you do want to support me, please consider sending a super chat if you're not already one of my supporters. That would be extremely helpful. So Luke asks, Currawong, will you have a look at the WP900 since you like the ESW9? Okay. I think I saw, if it's the one I'm thinking of, it's the one I saw at the last Tokyo show I could attend, which was late last year. Is it if it's the wood-backed one? I hadn't looked online. That might be an idea. I've actually been meaning to contact Audio-Technica about the ADX 5000s and review those. So I might consider doing one of their larger wood-backed headphones, because I guess there's always been a little bit of interest in them around and about Japanese wood-backed headphones. And I think in my Tokyo show report I had a picture of how they make the cups, and I think it was a WP 900 I'm thinking of. It was one of the new around the ear wood-backed headphones. So if it's that one, that's a very good suggestion. I will keep that in mind, as Audio-Technica have been on my list forever and I've just not got around to emailing them. So, okay. What I'm going to do at first is I'm going to answer the questions from my supporters, because, well, they're my supporters and they get priority. Then what I'll do is I'll loop back to the chat and have a look at what questions people are asking. So hold on to your hat for a bit. Now, I had a bunch of really good questions turn up. We're going to start this morning with, I think it's Michaelis. I don't know if I pronounced your name or nickname online wrongly. Just forgive me. I'm not sure what. People with using multiple nicknames with all sorts of languages, origins, and everything, and I'll probably screw them up. Is it better to have multiple mid-range headphones, say $200 to $500 range, or one or two $1,000 plus headphones, in your opinion? That's a good question. I'm going to tell a little anecdote. Back in 2009, when the Odyssey LCD2s came out, they were a big shock to everyone, and a lot of people at the time, I saw quite a few people at the time who owned multiple mid-range headphones sell up, when they auditioned a pair of the LCD2s, and they sold up all their low mid-range headphones and just got those. So I think it depends, I think for me, I like to have one kind of more neutral, hi-fi sounding pair of headphones. Say the D8000 Pros are sitting here, or the Utopias, which are sitting in view. Yeah, the Utopias are in view. And a darker pair of headphones for kind of more different kinds of music, like the Empyrean. So that's my 1 to 2 expensive pairs of headphones. So probably I'd say that's my kind of preference for sitting here listening. But depending on how you use your headphones, you might want to have, like, if I'm going on a flight, well, I can't use anything like this, and there's in-ear monitors are too uncomfortable for me for long periods, and even so, they don't isolate enough to knock out the plane noise. So I just take a pair of noise cancelling headphones and I have them sitting out of view, just out of view over here. And even if it's the inexpensive ones, and there's a pair I haven't reviewed there, which is a FIO forgot the name, something or other 3. Is it ECH3? Something like that. Anyway, I just take these. That's all I take. And they're like $169 pair of noise cancelling headphones because they're comfortable. And I know that 90% of my comfort and enjoyment is knocking out that airplane noise. And I'm not going to get a good listen. Unless what I do, and I've suggested this idea to a few people, you get some high-end in-ear monitors, or actually customs are probably better, and you put those in, and then on top of them you put the noise cancelling headphones. So that it means you have the wires and the noise cancelling. You look like a maniac, and if you're sitting in, and the problem is, if you, let's say the flight attendant comes around and wants to give you something, you have to take these off and untake it, and if it becomes a pain in the butt. And I just go for just the noise cancelling headphones alone. So I don't bother with going particularly fancy. But if you're like moving around a lot and you don't have time to, like you say, you're traveling on public transport a lot, I wouldn't bother with expensive, say, in-ear monitors, for example. If I have to do a lot of traveling, I would just get some quite decent in-ear monitors which I can enjoy with, for, say, if I'm on a not too noisy bus or in whatever, or somewhere where the noise isn't too loud, some noise cancelling headphones. I'd probably stay with mid-range stuff for most of what I do. And I've actually gone traveling places where I know I'll be busy, and I haven't bothered taking anything even remotely expensive at all. Actually, nothing, no audio system whatsoever. except noise cancelling headphones, because once I get to the hotel, I'm always busy hanging around people and I never have time to listen. And by the time I get back to my room, I only want to shower and sleep. So usage case scenario, I think, is important. So that answers that one. And apologies if you're chatting at the moment and I can't see the chat, so I may have missed anything you've said. So I will get back to that later. And if you're just joining me, good morning from Japan. And something that people don't often realize is I live in Japan, not in the US, not in Australia. Okay, so someone asked me what my floor, where we are. Yannickout, one of my supporters again, asked me, do you often use your floor standard speaker setup and what exactly is in it? And it's posted on my website, but it's a pair of ALAC FS247 speakers, and they're floor standing. They look like a pair of larger bookshelf speakers, but with basically they're floor standing with a woofer pointing down and dispersing out. And I chose them blind, like I didn't know how good they'd be. I chose them because I wasn't sure how the room setup would go if I had a normal pair of speakers, and they're fairly thin, which is probably not great for, if you want. I don't listen too loud, so it's not an issue about having, large drivers. And I like the ALAC kind of speaker sound, and it actually worked out well in my room with the bass. They don't have the best bass, but it turned out getting all the crap in my room acted as suitable bass trap to kind of reduce any most unnecessary reflections. Although I could probably do some work on the ceiling kind of thing to put some traps in here and there. And actually, I used it with an Audio GD Master 10 speaker amp. And it's a dead neutral amp. A lot of amps have a very slight, say, crosstalk curve or their performance curve. Their distortion measurements are very slightly V-shaped. This one is absolutely dead. It uses this special patented circuit which is absolutely dead flat in distortion and then just plunges through the treble. It's a very neutral amp, which is what I wanted. So if you say have different digital converters, you can actually hear the difference in how the sound stage is affected by different digital filters. You can hear it quite clearly, even in my room full of crap. It's enough to make out that kind of thing. And when do I use it? Well, when I don't feel like putting headphones on my head, or there's nobody else in the house but me, and I don't actually listen that loud. I listen at a quieter level with speakers than I do with headphones. Usually if I just want background music and I might be moving around and maybe I'm doing some work on something or writing something, and just if I want, or I'm looking for new music, so I might run Radio Paradise and see what comes up, see if I find any new music, or I might try stuff on Tidal or Cobuzz that people have suggested. And it's easier kind of to do sometimes with speakers and especially now in the summer, you see all this, well, this on this side I should say, is actually, I leave it turned off because it ends up being the air conditioning fighting against the speaker amp and all the headphone amps, and it gets way too hot in here with the sun shining on the house too. Especially in the afternoon, it becomes impossible to cool the room. So actually, I can't listen. Well, I can listen to speakers, I just don't. So now, next question is from Barbs127. Barbs127 says that what am I missing out on by underpowering my headphones? Whereas the volume is loud enough at 80%, but the amp is still well below the manufacturer's recommended milliwatt and ohm rating. Now that's a bit of a confusing question. I think I get what they're getting at. Now, if you're by underpowering, well, power, this is where things get tricky. It's not really so much about having, if you're getting close to the power limits of a lot of audio gear, especially if it's low powered, it might be, if this is confusing, and I've mentioned this before, amplifiers, usually regular headphone amplifiers, can either run in Class A or Class AB. Class A, there's 100% of the power going through the amp 100% of the time, so there's enough power reserve for any, because the amplifier is dealing with a fluctuating signal which it has to maintain. The power supply has to maintain linearity, so it has to not drop off if there's a big suck of power. And if you're using 100% of the power in the circuit all the time, it's got a huge reserve. Now, a pure Class A amp only runs in Class A, and then once you get to the power limit, distortion goes boom. You just hit a wall, and you see this in the the measurements where you see the curve going, the distortion curve going down. Then when it hits the power limit, boom. A Class AB amp actually starts off in class A, and then at some point it slides into class AB. Now, a lot of amps using those designs, the maximum power they say they output is actually in class AB. So usually what happens is the power goes up, 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 and then hits class AB, and then the amount of power, instead of being 100% of the power being used, is 50% of the power is available. So you do get this kind of what they call, well, Shit Audio wrote a great article on it, transconductors droop, where you get the power available kind of starts to level off. You don't want your list, usually most stuff, like let's say you have a 3-4 watt, this is why we have crazy powered amps, where you have 3 or 4 watts in an amp maximum output. Now you're not going to use that will destroy your headphones, it would destroy your hearing long before that too. What you're trying to avoid is having the amp slide into class AB during dynamic passages in the music, where you'll start to get compression, and things will start to blur a bit. Well, they won't be as clear. And if you have something like a portable device, I'm just thinking of something I can grab off the top of my head that's floating around on the desk. There's one little portable player I have yet to review, Heidi's AP80 actually. Then because the output power is going to be quite minimal, you're more likely to be sliding into class AB very fast using, well, not maybe in-ear monitors, but full-sized headphones for sure. So the sound will be more compressed, they'll be more blurred, it'll be less clear. Way back, it's not so much the case now. If you got a voltage drop, if you got insufficient voltage, you'd get, let me think, if you had insufficient voltage swing, you tended to get, with high impedance headphones, you tended to get the soundstage was narrower. And so the voltage output of these things, because you have to have voltage and current if you don't have enough voltage swing, then everything tends to sound narrow. If you don't have enough current delivery, enough power for current delivery, things tend to start to blur when they get complex. So main thing you get going up bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger amps is you get things to sound more spacious and more clear, and the amp doesn't sound like it's struggling to amplify complex passages. It sounds like doesn't sound like it's doing anything. It sounds easy. Like, for example, the Master 9, which is on a different rack at the moment because it's kind of bulky for that rack when I'm doing amp stuff. And the Master 9, for example, just doesn't sound like it's doing anything at all, and the music just comes through cleanly. So that's what you get from a higher end amp, and the same with the Studio 6. It doesn't feel like it's amplifying stuff, you just hear the music. So you get that kind of analogy, like the equipment disappears and you just hear the music. Very much so for higher end amps. So you get more space, and it can be weird because I remember a lot of music I heard often in one of my workplaces I was on just to the speaker system, the PA system, where you could hear just play music, and it was kind of crappy. I think I remember one song that always replayed was a Lenny Kravitz song that would cycle over every so often on the radio. And I remember, then you go back and you listen to it on a good system, it's like sounds completely different. You hear all this nuance and detail that you never ever heard before. And it also reveals how bad the recording of some of the stuff is. Like some of the music I like Alt J, sounds, it doesn't sound good on actually high-end gear. It isn't actually good for that. So that's that. So I hope you're all enjoying this Q&A with me. Thank you very much for Thomas Kohler for sending me €10. That is extremely appreciated. Before I forget, I will answer your message. So I see the X-Duo TA30 in the background. Very nice review. I wonder how good the amp sounds with the D880 900 600 ohm and the Sundara. Well, the Sundara actually it sounds. The Sundara is a very sharp sounding headphone, very kind of sharp and clear. It makes it sound a bit warm. It's a nice synergistic match. It's probably not getting the most out of the Sundaras, but I actually like the combo when I want a more relaxed listen. So it actually does work. Which tubes am I using? Well, I have the stock tubes in here at the moment. I actually ordered tube adapters, and so I could put in like 6922 compatible tubes and others, and some 2C51s. So I did try it with those. What I did actually, it's not plugged in, so I can do this. What's weird is it comes with this, of course, big cheap rectifier. At the moment, I just have in here the same one I had, the 5AR for Sovtech, which I just had spare, which I think was originally for the Studio 6 actually. So actually I found a good rectifier does make a useful difference with it. So I haven't really gone super, tube rolling. I haven't started tube rolling with it much. So yeah, but I've thought about it, like finding a better rectifier. But I think it's an amp that you don't need to go too crazy on with tubes. Given its kind of slightly warmer sound signature, I'd go for some kind of some tubes that have a bit of a reputation for a maybe sharper or clearer sound. Be interesting to try something like a pair of 6922 Amperex PQ tubes, but they're expensive, those ones. I think the cheapest I ever picked one up was about $60 a tube. But anyway, that's what I've been putting in there. Just if you can get 6922 tube adapters, they'll actually work with a bunch of 6922 tubes. So I tried at least one set of 6 FQ7s, which I had floating around, which are 6922 compatible. So there's actually a lot you can try with adapters. So, and I think the stock tubes, of which the ECC 88s, there are heaps of tubes available too. So, but I haven't really explored a heap of that kind of size of tube, unfortunately. So I haven't done tube amps for a while, actually. So thanks for that. Thanks very much appreciated. What I'm going to do, just for those who have just joined, I'm answering questions from my supporters, which I will do, and then I'll loop back to the chat. So what we're doing, next question was, just have to scroll down, work out where I'm at in my, what's a suitable volume control position for an amp? So for example, I often see the question, should I use the volume control on my computer or should I use the volume control on my amp? Usually it varies. If it's a computer, you probably don't want say the Windows volume control, the Apple volume control involved. The quality of those is poorer. But if you do have two devices, like behind me, if I can just work out which direction to move, you'll see the two IFI mini amps from Drop. Now, well, mini devices. One is the DAC, digital converter, and it has a volume control, though it can be set to fixed. And then you have the one on the amp. And you think, which one should I use? Well, actually, what you probably want to do is volume controls. Now, this is a good quality volume control, so it probably doesn't really apply. But usually, most volume controls, especially on cheaper gear, such as say, well, let's grab out the little Magni and have a look. Most volume controls at the very start of the movement and the very end of the movement have a bit of channel imbalance. Now, it depends on the manufacturer whether they buy high quality pots, whether they test all the pots first before putting in the amps. So you might just move, if you want to kind of be using the volume pot between about 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock on the volume. So you want to miss the first and the last part where there's channel imbalance, and you want to have a good range, obviously, so you can adjust the volume for different songs. If you switch from one album to another and the loudness is different. So the idea was to aim for around the 12 o'clock position, but it doesn't matter so much. So some amps I can only use up to about 9 o'clock. This happens to have a very good volume control, so it has no channel imbalance even at the start. So even if I'm at 8 o'clock on the volume control, no problem whatsoever. So it depends. You kind of just want to avoid that initial volume imbalance area of the pot's movement. That's the main thing. And if to do that, if you have to use digital, well, it depends on the device. High quality devices like high quality players probably have a very decent digital volume control. Computers generally by stock do not, unless you're using like a high-end player like Audivana or Roon. But even Roon, actually, I did try with my system, if I use Roon's volume control to adjust the gain slightly, because at least one DAC I have here, at least the Yggdrasil tends to have a higher output than is ideal for the Studio 6. If I do that, I actually hear the quality loss with this system very easily out of the digital volume control in Roon. It's very noticeable on the music I listen to. So you do have to experiment. I mean, if you had a mid-fi system, you probably wouldn't notice the difference. So I hope that answers that question. Excuse me while I jump around here. Let's have a look. Barb's also asks, assuming you were starting from scratch or planning to upgrade components, do you think there is a golden rule how to proportion budget between source, DAC, amp, and headphones? I don't think there's a golden rule because there's a lot of variance in. There's a lot of stuff that's pretty good value these days. Like I was looking at the Bifrost, and then there's the topping DAC and amps. They're inexpensive, but pretty good value. And I think a lot of that, of course, is the components that are available these days for headphone amplification are very good. And such that, you can even, now you have $200 components which perform very well. So I think, though, now considering there is also a law of diminishing returns, I'd probably keep the price of the maybe headphones would be higher than the components you'd use, but I don't think there's a golden rule ratio. I mean, if you spend about the same on your headphones and other components, yeah, that'll work. Okay, so what are we looking at? $4,000, 2,300. I forget what the drizzle is now, and headphones, $3,000-$4,000. Yeah, okay, that kind of works out. And then of course chuck in 10% for cables, for better than cheap cables, from my opinion. So I don't think there's a hard and fast rule, but kind of in the general direction of keeping the prices fairly equivalent. With in-ear monitors, I'm thinking you probably want to go higher on the headphones. Headphones would be the first priority. If you're buying like a $4,000 amp and a $1,000 pair of headphones, well, you could do that. I mean, if you really love the synergy, but it would probably be a little bit overkill in the amp side of things. So I think the headphones still or in-ear monitors should still be the higher priced items, going by, say, just the retail price. I mean, I didn't pay, for Utopias here. I bought them second hand for $2,500, and they often can be found discounted at $3,000. So kind of take that into account. But the general retail price, the headphones should be the more expensive thing, as I reckon anyway, from my experience. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice here. That's why I have water with me. Now, so if we got through all the questions, I hope I haven't missed anyone's questions. Okay. Right. I think there were some that came in via email, so I have to find them. So, okay, where are we at? Was there a question? Saeed, who's been a supporter for a very long time now. If I can compare the bass treble soundstage air and presence of the Master 9 and the Studio 6. So they're really radically different amps. The Studio 6 is a pure Class A amp with a very interesting circuit, actually. Heavy tube rectification, and then a gain stage using a 6S and 7 or compatible tube, and output using, what are they called again? Brain doesn't, 6V6, sorry. Brain doesn't work at this time early in the morning. 6V6 tubes, they're the same ones they use in guitar amps. And the Master 9 is a class, I think it's Class A, Class AB. It's not pure Class A, it would cook the room. Or it could be pure Class A all the way through. I should check that, actually. It's, a 9-watt output amp that uses ACSS and, basically a current gain stage. If you don't know what that is, don't worry. It changes the signal to one, instead of a voltage signal, a current signal, which makes amplification, excuse me, it makes amplification, it reduces distortion during amplification. Anyway, actually, when you get into that kind of level, they aren't that radically different. I think the Audio GD high-end gear tends to be just very completely uncolored and just lets the music through. And with some headphones, say very neutral tuned headphones, D8000 Pros, and the Susvaras, that can be a little bit boring. But with the Studio 6 isn't really colored. I've got actually the most colored tubes I have in it are these Brimars. And even then, it adds just a touch of, I suppose, tube warmth. And there are two kinds of tube kind of sounds, if you like. One is to be slightly roll off and warm. The second one is to have, the old school is to have a V-shaped sound. So it enhanced the sound stage by, as far as I understand, if you look at the crosstalk measurements of the amp with the tubes in, you'd end up with a slight V shape. So by having more crosstalk in the bass and the treble, it gave you a slightly V-shaped sound without the frequency response changing. One of those things people don't realize. and it made a slight V-shaped frequency response, gave you a sense of a larger sound stage, even if it didn't actually have one, which is why some people like slightly V-shaped headphones or in-ear monitors especially, because it gives you an artificial increase in the sense of soundstage due to the way your ears and brain interpret sound. So if the singer is further away, it sounds like if the singer is, you reduce the strength of the singer's voice, it sounds like they're further away, that kind of thing. And so it depends very much on the tubes. It doesn't change very radically, but there is some subtle tuning that can be done if I put in a sharper sounding set of tubes. Say, if I put in a Mel's 6SN7 and a couple of the better GE tubes, it becomes very more sharp and clear. And if I put in, it's got a 2C51 in there at the moment, and those Brimar tubes, it sounds a little bit more, a touch more mellow. So, but otherwise they're fairly comparable, except the Master 9 is technically better. Of course, the Studio 6 has a little bit of hum or a little bit of maybe the bit of imperfection in the tubes. It would not measure well, but its performance and detail retrieval are fantastic. But in terms of detail, probably the Master 9 would maybe just win out simply because of not having to deal with imperfections in tubes and that kind of thing. And if depending on how worn out the rectifier tubes are. So, but it's not radically different. It's very tube dependent, I think, more than anything. But yeah. But you can get, with careful tube setup, it does sound really, really nice to listen to with headphones, especially like these D8000 Pros, where you just want a touch of euphoria in there, because I listen to them straight out of the Hugo 2 and listen to them, out of this, and I lose a bit of detail going through the Studio 6 just for that little bit of more, if I'm just enjoying listening rather than focusing on micro detail. So, hope that answers that question. And I have messages popping up all over the place. Okay, so now to get into the chat, and I've missed a whole lot. Let's see if we can go back and find out where we got lost. So, the stuff that scrolled off the screen. Have you tried the Drop 177X? No, I haven't, unfortunately. Usually if you want to see what I've used or tried, and it's slightly out of date, if you go onto my website, here.reviews, and you look in the About and Currawong, it actually lists all the stuff I have here. Is there a list of all my reviews? No, but all the stuff that I've had here has been listed there. It's slightly out of date because of a couple of things I haven't added yet, such as some of the amps and DACs behind me. Let's see. What do I think about the new Sony XM4 headphones? I ordered a pair. I'll be talking about those when they arrive. It'd be interesting. They always say they're really kind of dark and muddy sounding. That'll be interesting to compare how they sound to the ones I have here, such as the Dalis and the Fios. So, but of course they priced them up, and I guess they're trying to push up the price of or initial price of Sony stuff tends to be high, and then it drops down. So I think they'll eventually sell for about $100 less. Wonder if you've ever owned a biocellulose driver like the Denon D7000? Not the D7000. I owned the original D5000s though. I think I've listened with Sony R10s, which is interesting because we know that Hi-Fi Man just released an R10 clone intentionally, and which made everyone very angry. A lot of people very angry. I don't know why. They're just headphones, but which is another discussion. I'm not hyped about types of old school drivers. Basically, planers have completely demolished any benefit of special drivers completely. Really, the discussion about the Hi-Fi Man clone, if you listen back to Sony R10s now compared to modern headphones, they are just not good, it's real shock. And years ago, I took a pair of, at the time I had LCD3s, and I took them to a meet where there were R10s there, and I compared them, and I thought, well, my LCD3s are better. And even some owners have admitted that the mid-range is what's really fantastic about the R10s, but bass performance is just lousy compared to modern planers. So it's a real big change we've had in headphones. It's been really noticeable in the last few years. So about special normal drivers, normal drivers are now for cheap headphones. Apart from, say, like the Utopias, which use a special, beryllium driver based on their speaker driver designs, basically in the really high-end range, when I think of things like Ultrasone, where they have $2,000 headphones with normal drivers, it's like, I keep, if I met the guys again who run Ultrasone, I'd say, guys, make a planer. Come on. $2,000 for a regular driver headphone, no matter what the specialty in the design. No, sorry. I haven't heard the Abyss Diana for a long time, so that's something I've considered borrowing, actually. Just scrolling through the chat. Let's see. I don't think I've seen Grados on your show much. What do I think of them? Well, I actually have. They're not Grado. Well, they were originally. These are from okay, so a small company, a guy called Ryden on Headfi, his actually name is Ryden. He wanted to make, he didn't say explicitly, he wanted to make an old HP 1000 clone. He did. He made custom drivers. So without knocking the microphone, I'll take this off. And so he made his own drivers. And they're up to, I think, version 9 now. And originally, he had these metal cup inserts. And he'd put in inside your Grado. So you buy a pair of Alessandros or the... I don't remember Grado models. RS... The one of the metal one in the middle. I forgot the name of it because I haven't checked out Grado stuff for so long. And you'd send them into him and he'd mod them with his drivers and these inserts. Now, he doesn't do the inserts anymore. He just does the drivers because everyone and their dog has been making Grado-style wood cups. And because they're very easy for people to do. People have been experimenting with turning and tuning. And I really liked these because they were like high-resolution Grados. Now, Grado, I guess, have upped their game, but I just haven't had much interest in them. I mean, there are certain people really like their really intense mid-forward sound. Actually, someone suggested I do videos about what headphones are good for what genres. And for rock, they were always traditionally really, really good. And they can't do very strong bass response. The driver just isn't large enough. But the drivers are like, $120 a pair or something like that, sometimes cheaper. And then you find someone to make some, well, let's say all up you spend, say, $200-300 on a pair of these things. Someone makes some wood cups and they have a headband and all that. They're actually pretty nice. The weird thing was some Italian company, and the name I've forgotten, decided to make essentially the same thing with some weird driver combinations, like one driver behind the other, double drivers and weird stuff, and sell them for like $3,000-4,000. I'm like, really? But for $300, for I think around $300, you can actually get some really enjoyable headphones. I'm just using them as monitor headphones at the moment with the... hope that didn't cause any feedback in the mic, actually, holding them near here because it was actually plugged in. So if you heard feedback, my apologies. But actually, I really do... no one heard feedback, did they? That's good. So, excuse me, early in the morning and my voice doesn't work. So, yeah, so the Grados, but Grado now, I haven't really checked out their stuff for a while. They do some stuff that can be really enjoyable, like I like the original HF one, the Headfi 1 headphones, and that's kind of got me into the Symphones ones. Let's have a look. Where are we at? Lost track of where I'm scrolling through. So, thoughts on Beyerdynamic versus Sennheiser. I haven't heard the Beyerdynamic headphones for a while. I suppose the Beyerdynamic ones tended to be kind of V-shaped, and the Sennheiser tended to be mid-focused. So, I suppose it's personal preference. Some people really like the V-shaped Beyerdynamic headphones with a kind of sharp treble, and some people don't. So, I actually have the Beyerdynamics contact details. I should get some stuff in for review. That is, where are we at? In the winter, do you ever turn all the amps on just to heat the room? Yes. I just leave everything switched on. Well, I kind of in two minds about that. I don't want to burn out the tubes in this because some of them are expensive. I assume it's hard for you to get ZMF headphones. We actually talked to Zach about reviewing stuff, and it just didn't end up happening. He just didn't end up sending stuff. So no particular reason. I think he just was busy and forgot. I don't know how organized he is. So thank you. Someone else I have to thank in just a second. Will I review the AKG K712 Pro? No, I don't have contacts with AKG, and I'm not thrilled about the older style AKGs. I have a K7XX, and I never reviewed it. I actually just bought it from Drop, and I kind of like. I used it. I wanted it also for testing. It's like, no, I'm just not enthusiastic. Um, okay. If I was listening, someone asked AKG K712 Pro or Hyperman Sundara, I'd use Sundaras, although be cautious, don't drop them. Be careful, take care of them, because I've heard they break easily. But as all rounders, the Sundaras easily. Be interesting to try the new AKGs to see what they could do, but just the planar drivers just completely beat the. They're just way considerably better than what you can do with a regular dynamic driver. Um, Scott Lau brought up an interesting point, and thank you for someone who just sent me. Thank you, Alexander, for sending me $2. I'll get my top five. Who wants to know my top five favorite headphones? Something I just wanted to bring up, and I forgot what it was. Let's go down here and find where I got lost in the discussion. There's someone made a comment about budget amps and about quality. This is something that really bugs me when budget gear is balanced, and they say it's balanced, it's balanced, it's balanced. And case in point, IFI, although they do actually a pretty good job of doing cheap balanced stuff. When you are making stuff down to a price, if you adding have to have a balanced circuit, you need double the components. So there's some of your budget being cut into by having to add components. So what gets compromised? Well, usually the power supply. You don't need balanced in cheap gear. It doesn't make it any better. So if you think about it, is make a balanced device going to be better than a more expensive single-ended device with a better power supply? No, it's not. And it's the same thing with these. This is going to be a case in point, the Heidi's AP80. It has a horrible sounding 3.5mm out, but it has a nicer sounding balanced out. But why did they just make a good sounding 3.5mm out? It means the average person who buys one of these is going to get crappy sound if they use regular headphones, and they're going to need to buy a balanced cable. Now, some people, enthusiasts always say to me, but I already have balanced cable. It's like, well, you're an enthusiast. Normal headphones, most of them in an expensive range have 3.5mm connections. And the balance doesn't make it better. It sounds better, obviously, than the single-ended inside the actual device. But if they they could just as easily make a good single-ended device. In expensive gear, it doesn't matter. The Master 9 Orso, it's a huge amp. You're paying for having all that componentry in there. And for some guy to sit and patiently match transistors, you don't have matched transistors, using discrete components. If you don't have matched transistors, then your amplification will not quite be balanced. It'll be slightly imbalanced, so you have to spend a lot of time matching transistors, matching components. So you do lose out on that trying to make cheap balanced gear, because you're going to sit match transistors or match op amps. Good luck with that. It's just not going to happen. I mean, one of the points I think Jason Stoddard made was when he was doing, you can actually buy matched transistors which are built into pairs into like one little chip, like what looks like a chip, and you can actually buy them pre-matched from Texas Instruments or whoever, and they use those in the Magni 3 Plus. So, but that's something like cheap balanced is just like, why do companies, they do that because people go, oh, it's balanced, it's better. No, it's not. Not at the cheap end. In the high end, that's different. So just something to point out there. Cheap balanced stuff is just for marketing hype. Okay. Touching tubes. Someone mentioned about touching tubes in the thing. It won't kill it to touch the tubes a little bit with your fingers, but not too much. Maybe I should polish off the oil, but I don't think it will make a significant difference to the tubes. They don't get screamingly hot. Now, Alexander Gomez wanted to know my top 5 favorite headphones. And, let's see. So, that's a tough one. The ones I have here. Then note, I haven't tried everything. So I haven't tried the Abyss for a long time. The Abyss was fantastic when I tried them at Meets on a good amp. I haven't, be interesting to try them again. But my top 5, well, the stuff that I've used, the stuff I have here, it's going to be the D8000 Pro, Empyreans, recabled, do note, the stock cable just makes them sound really dull. I suppose the Susvaras out of a really powerful amp like that, hugely expensive hi-fi man, it sound amazing. What else do I have off the top of my head? Utopias, I suppose. Headphones are a tricky one. But again, there are a lot of I'd like to try. Just going on my memories of the Abyss, I've heard them sound really fantastic set up. Obviously, the Stax SR009S again requires an extraordinarily expensive amp to get running. But probably I should probably include headphones that are less expensive. I think Mr. Speakers has done extremely well with the Eons, though there are some aspects of them I don't always like. Sometimes the dynamics seem a little bit muted in his designs, but I mean, no one does a closed back at $700, which is as good, I think. But I've got to get them in. There have been a bit of delays. I didn't end up getting the Eon 2s in for review this time. I can get them. I can organize them anytime, and I probably will. And I should have done that before. It'd be interesting to try the ADX 5000s. I really loved those headphones from Audio-Technica. They really pulled out all the stops and made a really excellent pair of high-end headphones that are just really, really engaging and actually very resolving. So a top 5 is kind of really hard to do because I'd actually have to think about which of these headphones would actually have something special, and it'd have to be headphones I'd had in here for a while. But I mean, you could also add in the 6XX, like the HD6XX, which has, it's sold hugely well and provides a lot of enjoyment, like an experience of basic kind of high-end sound that you get as well. Maybe Hi-Fi Man Sundaras, which sound very good for the kind of money they're asking. You get them for $350, they're fantastic. And this is why I said regular driver headphones, a lot of them were around under $500, and it's kind of hard to justify when you have planers that cheap, which are really good. Interesting question. What's the best way to tell if a headphone is detailed? Well, you need music that's detailed. So you get a really high quality recording, and the ones I use are David Chesky, or there are things like very high quality masters from Decca. Say I have a particular one, Julie Fisher, Sarasate, and that you can hear, that's close, I think must be very close mic'd. You can hear all the subtleties of what's going on with the bowing on the violin. And I suppose you're testing the system as well, not just the headphones, but I listen in, say, for example, the David Chesky one I used in my recent reviews was a Jazz and New Harmonic. And you can hear, the quality of that is outstanding. You can hear all the detail of how the cymbals shimmer after they're hit. And how clearly I can hear that is how I determine how much detail I'm hearing through my headphones or IEMs that I'm testing. And it's very clear. It's very, very clear. When you hear it on a really high-end system, it's just unbelievable the subtleties of what you can hear. So you need really high-quality recordings. And then you listen out for particular details or maybe a particular passage or whatever. If you hear piano, for example, if you go up to a piano, here's something you can go. You can go up to an actual piano and hit a note and hear how the harmonics decay throughout the piano. So you'll hit a note and you'll get harmonic interaction from the other strings, and you hear those harmonies. Get used to hearing them. Do that for a while. Then find a really good high-quality piano recording, and that's kind of a challenge in itself. And if you can hear those harmonies, that means you're going to be using a really high-end headphone. And then you'll be in a multi-$1,000 system, usually, to get that, reproduce that. So that's where you hear detail. Now, but it's special when the expression of the playing is very dependent on that, such as that Jazz the New Harmonic album, then, that's where you need high-end gear to really appreciate it. But a lot of stuff, there's a lot of music out there. Like I was listening to Alt J, and I don't listen to Alt J on high-end gear because it sounds awful. And I actually just listen to it in the car mostly because it's just the recording quality is terrible. If I want to listen to Alt J in high quality, I go and look on, ironically, YouTube and look for one of their live recordings like KEXP when they were live and that kind of thing. That's much, much better. Or Tiny Desk. If you Tiny Desk concerts, yes, I know it's lossless, but lossy recording. Tiny Desk concerts, actually, I appreciate that you don't have the awful recording and mastering of a lot of pop stuff when you hear the musicians on Tiny Desk. So, where are we at in time? We're almost at the end. Let's scroll down. Drunk Sorrow, thank you very much for another donation of $5. You're already a supporter, aren't you? So that's very cool. You can hear the cicadas in the background already. Yes, they've started up as the sun's starting to rise. They get up to, I've measured them at 90 dBs continuous outside. I have a video of that too, measuring them at 90 decibels. It's pretty intense. I'm actually going to, and thank you very much for the cup of coffee. What I'm actually going to do is I realize I have noise cancelling headphones here. I've already taken notes and tested there's FIOs. But when the Sonys arrive, it's like, well, I can't fly a plane, which would be an ideal testing thing. So actually I found someone had put a recording on YouTube of plane noise. They'd done it in an empty plane flying somewhere. They just set up a mic and just run it for the whole 10 hours of a flight. Well, not whole 10 hours. I don't know if it was a whole 10 hours of a flight, but for 10 hours worth of a flight in an empty plane, they recorded it. And I'm actually going to use that through speakers. They measured, it'll be 76 decibels because it's to simulate a 767, or 67 decibels to simulate something like an A350 through my speakers to test the noise cancelling. So I don't know if it'll do the bass though. I don't know how good the person's microphones were. So let's have a look. 90 degrees, isn't that dangerous to be around the cicadas? Well, for half an hour or more, yes, if I sat there for half an hour. But it's getting into the range where long exposures, so 30 minutes or more, would be actually bad for your hearing. So it is loud. That's and this is what you get for coming in, sitting in nature in Japan. All trees all around there, all trees. So I actually it's and double glazed windows, and you can still hear them. That's how loud they are. Did I try to burn in your eon? I didn't. Oh, sorry, we're missing them. It's a question for someone else. Do you think people often mistake treble intensity for detail? Yes. That's actually the Rob Watts, who made the digital chord gear, talked a lot about how harshness can be mistaken for detail. People think brightness can be mistaken for detail. I think to a degree, because the balance between the different frequencies. Something I mentioned in actually some of my reviews. I was comparing the in-ear monitors I have, which are often very V-shaped in some of the tuning, to say the Andromeda. It was actually the MW10 specifically, which are very dark sounding, but the Andromedas too. The MW10s are very detailed, but you can hear it, but because they're kind of darker and thicker sounding, it doesn't strike you immediately. You have to listen for the detail. It's easier, of course, with in-ear monitors, but it's very clear with that particular track with the cymbals that the detail was there, but they're darker sounding. So, but definitely there's an issue where the balance of frequencies can make something sound more detailed, but real detail you notice in the really high quality music, and thankfully that's kind of readily available nowadays. So, but yeah, absolutely, you can fool your brain a lot with different kinds of depending how like headphones and earphones are set up. I mean, you can get software which will give you a 3D effect around your ears. Can's 3D and what's the other one? In Your Head, was it In Your Head, or I've forgotten the names of them. There are a few of them out there, and they really do work because they use how your brain works. They delay certain sounds and frequencies to give you a 3D effect. And actually, what am I thinking? Of course, on the Odyssey Mobius, I actually use that. I actually think that's really cool because then I can hear. It gives me an effect of like I can hear how my sound is. I use them actually for when I'm video editing because I can hear how my voice actually sounds. It actually uses the 3D effect, gives that more of an effect of what the mic actually hears. So it is a trick, but it actually helps. So I don't have any opinions on Denon stuff. I haven't tried Denon stuff in a long time, just to know. And they changed it. When I first went into stores and tried Denon gear, I then they then changed their range and changed everything, so I didn't really explore stuff after that. Let's have a look. Another thing to consider, actually, considering high frequencies, is everyone has a null in their hearing. They have a point in their hearing where their hearing cancels out. It's like that thing with the eye. If you close one eye, stick your finger out and look straight ahead, and then whilst looking straight ahead, move your finger, you'll see your finger will disappear at a certain point, or you'll get a gap where you can't see it clearly, and that's where your optic nerve comes into the back of your eye. It can't actually there are no cells there to sense to actually pick up. So you actually have a null there, but your brain cancels that out. In your hearing too, between about 8 to 10 kilohertz, you'll have a null. So let's say you have a pair of band dynamics and they have a treble peak at 9 kilohertz, and your null is at 9 kilohertz. Then you'll think they sound darker than someone else who has a null at, say, 8 kilohertz. And so you'll get and I was discussing this with someone who's measuring headphones. They actually experimented with this, and they said one person they were talking to thought the particular pair of headphones didn't sound bright at all. Another person found them piercing. So something to consider. So differences are really much there. Let's have a look. What else people are questioning? Oh, actually, thank you, Ryan, for that comment about Old J. I really like Relaxer. That's a really good album. There's some live performances of some of it. It's a very, very clever album. Actually, I really like Alt J in general. Very, very, very original, and that's what I very much appreciate. Is it worth buying an $8,000 pair of $8,000 amp for the original HD800? I can't really say. It depends. It's really up to you. If you have $8,000 to spare. Now, of course, this is not the time of year to do it, but once all as I call it, the Corona apocalypse has ended, go to CanJam. If you have $8,000 to spare for an amp, go to a CanJam and listen to as much as possible. Now, granted, we may not be able to listen to gear. We may have to bring our own headphones only, and only be able to plug stuff in. I don't know what's going to happen, but the traditional thing was go and audition stuff. I don't know what stores are opening and what they're doing with auditioning, but if you have stores nearby that have headphone amps, if you have that amount of money, I would pay to travel and audition stuff personally. And of course, now in this year, I don't know how readily possible that is, but I don't know if at HD800s personally, I would spend that much. I would rather. The planers I have behind me and the Utopias, I find far more detailed than the HD800s. And if I was spending big gear, spending big money, if I had $8,000, I'd probably buy one of these planers plus a Chord TT2. That's where I'd spend $8,000 at the moment, because that would be, I think, would be a better result, unless you really like that super tubey sound where you wouldn't like it, maybe not like it so much. I've not compared. Someone has just asked, Catlin just asked, if the Empyreans versus Stax. That's a tough one. Stax disadvantage, you're buying one pair of headphones and one amp you can't use with anything else. But it depends if you really like the sound. The Empyreans are really darker, warmer sounding, and I prefer them recabled, as I've already said, and because otherwise they sound too warm and too dull. And then the Stax, well, some people, if you listen to a lot of, say, classical, and you like the super precision in the instruments and that delicate sound, then if you really love the Stax sound, then you might like the Stax system better. So it depends on preference. If you can audition them because there's a radically different sound there, it depends on the music you like. If you like kind of an all-rounder pair of headphones where the Empyreans are better, you can plug them into cheaper gear, you can plug them into expensive gear, and they drive fine. The Stax are very limited, and of course you're limited to, but it depends, the Stax are a very light set. They sit on your head. They're very easy listening. There's absolutely zero isolation too. What would I prefer, K712 or HD600? I'm not sure. I haven't tried the K712s. So, thoughts on RMA versus dinner frips? I haven't. Again, both companies of gear I haven't tried, so I can't really. Probably, as things go, you'd be choosing between RME is a pro audio brand, so you'd be choosing something that will be very kind of clean, clear sounding, versus dinner frips, which makes R2R DACs. They're probably going to be a little bit warmer, more euphonic sounding, So it depends on personal preference and depends on your setup. So for example, I use, a very clean, clear sounding DAC, actually the Yggdrasil with a slightly euphonic tube amp, Studio 6, and I really like that combo. Same, I might use the Chord Hugo too with that. Just you lose a bit of detail, but you get a little bit of a euphonic sound. So it depends on your whole setup and what balances out nicely. That being said, it's easier to take a DAC which is more kind of, I suppose, neutral, and then you can adjust, find an amp preference that you like for that. Whereas if you haven't, say, a DAC which is always warm sounding or mellow, then you kind of limits you a little bit. But I'd really like to try the Denafrips gear because a lot of the ladder DACs nowadays are only slightly euphonic. Maybe they're a bit of even order harmonic distortion and are generally fairly clean and clear sounding to a large degree. And I really do like ladder DACs, can be extremely pleasurable to listen to. Thank you, Alexander, again. Have you tried the Ultrasone Signature Pro? Now, that's an interesting story about the Signature Pro from Ultrasone. So way back when I started in end of 2007 on Headphone, one of the big headphones that came out then was the Ultrasone Edition 9. They were $1,500, and remember this is back then, so they're probably about $2,200, $300 now. And they were the only high-end headphone that was available, and they were hyped through the roof. And they sound like nowadays a pair of $700, $800 Campfire Cascades, and kind of V-shaped, very entertaining, and they were the thing to have. And eventually they stopped making them, and they put the same drivers in the Signature Pro, and the Signature DJ may be the same drivers as well, but they made them. Yeah, the Signature Pro is what used to be the Ultrasone's top of the line high-end headphone. So yeah, if they do, especially some people, the S-Logic system for some people gave this really around your head effect, and most people it didn't. If it does gel with you, absolutely fantastic. For some people, Ultrasone just really works and really sounds fantastic, and for a lot of people it doesn't. So, but yeah, so if you really like them, they are, they're pretty comfortable. I don't know. I'd pay whatever it is they were asking. They were asking about the $800. I forget. They're probably, if they sold them now for about $500, I'd say yeah. Some people are going to really love those. So they're probably one of the exceptions to me just saying go out and buy Platos. But they're closed back too. So those Signature Pro and Signature DJ I actually thought were pretty good, but maybe nowadays a little bit high priced for preference. Okay, so I'm going to finish up now for any last questions. Okay, someone suggested I do more speaker reviews. My wife would kill me. You don't know how much stuff I have in here. Boxes through the cupboards, boxes through more cupboards, boxes in my kids' rooms, boxes in, boxes everywhere. Room for speakers, no. I have to haul them up the stairs too. It was bad enough hauling up these LACs which I have now, up the stairs. Not going to be doing speaker reviews. I could do bookshelf speakers, but yeah, I don't have proper stands, and no, it's just going down into a pit which I don't want to go into, and I don't have enough experience with speakers. I suppose I could just talk about them straight until I got enough experience. But if I was to review speakers, I would make friends with a hi-fi store. Like if I was still living back in Australia, I used to know a hi-fi store. I'd probably just review the speakers that are in there and sit and listen all day in their place, and then review them based on that, which would be really cool, and promote the store as well, and they'll probably let me do it. But here it's kind of it's kind of a pain. I could do, actually the local hi-fi store might let me do that, but it's just too much of a hassle. Did I ever try Bottlehead Crack? No, unfortunately not. A lot of people really like them though. Okay, so why do people hate sound cards? Probably because they used to be pretty poor. I think now, I don't know, I want to be interesting to see how PC sound cards compare to actual DAC amps and that kind of thing. There's a massive gap between the Ananda and Focal Clear. Which do you prefer? Well, I've never actually both. I've no experience with, so I can't tell you. When you reviewed the Holgich Dukes, I didn't actually review those. One of my supporters actually reviewed them, so that wasn't actually my review. He lives in Australia, so he knows the manufacturer. they're apparently very, very, very dead neutral. So there'd be something like probably something maybe like, no, actually they wouldn't be like headphones at all. If I was to guess, if they're dead neutral. Dead neutral speakers are actually don't sound like what a classically neutral headphone. Their sound would sound too mid-forward if they were headphones. So HD6XX is closer to a speaker neutral, except the bass. So if you like a bookshelf speakers sound sort of like a HD6XX, that's a very vague explanation, but that's roughly right. What headphones do I consider my end game? Difficult question. I'm pretty happy with the D8000 Pros at the moment. I want to try the RAL headphones. They are just mind-blowing amazing. So it depends on how good they do the bass. I'd have to test that. I should get the RALs in here. I think I can borrow them. Now, so I'm going to end the stream for now. Thank you all for joining me. Before I go, if you want to understand how science works, is not an arbiter of truth, but how science stuff about the discovery of science. My father actually wrote a book 20 years ago, Science, Myth or Magic, which you can find on Amazon. And it's in Kindle form, so you can read it if you want to understand. Someone misunderstood when I quoted part of this book that science is about observing something, making a hypothesis about the reasons for it, and testing that. That is how science works. It's not this is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is bad, this measures well, this doesn't measure well. No. This explains, my father was a scientist, and he explains it. So do consider if you want to learn it's about biological science mainly. He didn't do anything. His interest in audio was just having a speaker system. And so do consider that on Amazon. Thanks everyone who sent me a super chat. That was very cool. And thanks all my supporters as well. If you're not already aware, I do have a Patreon. So you can just do patreon.com/Currawong, which I'll just paste into the chat. So you can see what I offer is simply, if you like people to super chat to me, bought me a coffee once in a while, it's like buying me a coffee once a month kind of thing. You can get my buying advice anytime, which if you're spending hundreds or again thousands of dollars might help you save a lot of money. And also, I have a community. You can chat to me direct. You can see my impressions of new gear. If you want to see everyone want to see the impressive rack, if I can pull it out here without dropping everything on the floor and catching all the cables. This is the IM rack at the moment with a whole lot of in-ear monitors on it, including the new Campfire ones, which are in here. There's the IR. And the Andromedas are hiding in here somewhere. Oh, can we see them? And Solaris, which are hiding in here too. And I'm doing more in-ear monitors because it's too hot to run amps, and then I'll do more back to headphones. If you'd like to see my impressions of those, which I've already posted, you can become a patron. And also you can see all my video stuff in advance too, like first cuts and some behind the scenes stuff and other bits and pieces. So, or if you want to wait out, I'll eventually set up probably memberships on YouTube as well. So thanks everyone for supporting. A quick question someone asked, why don't I see Odyssey on there? No particular reason. I just haven't organized it. Anything you haven't seen here, I just haven't organized usually, and because I'm so space limited, I could email a dozen companies and get a ton of gear in here, but I'd just be overwhelmed. It's like even with I have a family and everything like that, I do run out of space, and it becomes. That's why you can see I had to remove a whole amp to get space for putting all this stuff in here, and it becomes ridiculous. If I could show you, I can't move the camera. There's like just behind here, I can just see it. That's a whole stack of wall warts and for all the shit gear. It's all the shit gear is stacked up on one shelf with a bunch of amps. And again, there's another rack in front of me full of gear. And that's why a lot of stuff I just haven't organized to review it. It just don't have the space and sometimes not the time. So thanks everyone for supporting me. And well, if you'd like to become a supporter, consider that. Otherwise, I'll see you guys all